When Chloe, the campus belle, suggested modifying the performance costumes with fluorescent paint, everyone cheered for her brilliant creativity. Even my childhood sweetheart gazed at her with tender admiration. Only I knew the paint was a corrosive toxin. In my previous life, it destroyed everyone. And I, the only survivor, was branded the culprit and tortured to death. Now reborn, I watched them excitedly smear poison on their skin. I smiled and helped the one who hated me most apply to extra layers. Make it brighter, I said softly. Otherwise, how could it possibly match that pretty face of yours? I died behind North City Art Academy, on the lonely hill behind the campus. Xavier, my childhood sweetheart, the man I had called brother for 18 years, used a thick sewing needle to stitch my once prized white ballet dress into my flesh, one excruciating stitch at a time. He smiled as he asked, "Does it hurt, Luna?" Chloe only wanted to make the costumes prettier. Why did you have to ruin her work? The needle pierced my skin, trailing beads of blood. Agony racked my body, but I could make no sound. He had already forced a piece of burning charcoal down my throat minutes before. Hurts, doesn't it? Not being able to defend yourself? It's your stubbornness that killed her. Chloe, the goddess of our academy, adored as a muse, had secretly altered the performance costumes for the centennial celebration. The cheap fluorescent paint she used caused severe chemical burns, disfiguring every dancer. Unable to bear the shame, she leapt from the rooftop. As the lead dancer and program director, and the only one unscathed, I became the scapegoat. Xavier and our classmates decided I had sabotaged the paint out of jealousy. They lured me to the back hill, faces once friendly now twisted with zeal as they watched him punish me. He poured acid carefully over my face, as if perfecting a work of art. When Chloe died, her face was scarred. Yours shouldn't be spared either, I screamed and writhed in the dirt. But stones and curses were all that answered, while dogs devoured what was left of me. My parents, after seeing the viral video of my torment while white-haired overnight, they swore to prove my innocence. But Xavier bribed witnesses and forged evidence. In the end, Chloe's deranged mother, guided by him, broke into our home and hacked my parents to death in the living room. Blood drowned my memories. Hatred pulled me back from the darkness where my bones had turned to dust. And then, Luna, why are you spacing out? Chloe's idea is brilliant. You're the lead dancer, don't you care about team spirit? Xavier's voice, so familiar it chilled my marrow. I opened my eyes abruptly. Before me was the bright Studio A, mirrors reflecting my unblemished face. My throat was whole, I could still speak. I fumbled for my phone. The date: one day before the North City Art Academy's centennial performance. I had been reborn. In the center of the studio, Chloe stood with a jar of unmarked paint, smiling sweetly. Everyone, my uncle just brought this from overseas, the latest fluorescent paint. Once we apply it to our costumes, we'll be the brightest stars on stage. She was graceful, radiant, an angel in everyone's eyes. But I knew the truth. That jar contained industrial-grade corrosive chemicals from her uncle's factory. Last time, it ruined 30 futures and sent my family into hell. The class erupted with excitement. Chloe, you're amazing. Yeah, our routine's kind of dull, but with this, we'll totally win first place. Xavier stepped forward, his voice warm enough to drown in. Chloe always surprises us. Luna, you're the team leader, what do you think? Every gaze turned to me, expectant and fervent. In Xavier's eyes, I caught a flicker of warning. He feared I'd ruin Chloe's moment again. In my past life, I had, driven by duty, I'd refused. The costumes are school-issued. We can't alter them. And that paint is unverified. What if something goes wrong? They called me rigid, jealous. Xavier's face had turned cold. Luna, can't you let go of your envy? Like, can't you stand seeing someone outshine you? That was when I learned that, in his heart, I wasn't worth even a strand of Chloe's hair. Now, I looked at their bright, eager faces soon to be twisted in pain, suppressing the hatred surging within. I smiled radiant, even brighter than Chloe herself. I walked to her, lifted the paint as though cradling a treasure. Chloe, your idea is pure genius. My voice wasn't loud, but it rang clear through the studio. Everyone froze. Even Xavier looked at me, startled. Ignoring their confusion, I continued, my tone almost lyrical. This isn't just paint, it's the emblem of our pride. The wings that will carry us to victory. I completely agree. In fact, to achieve the best effect, I suggest that every one of us personally coat our entire costume with this glowing hope. Turning to the crowd, I spread my arms wide, as if embracing the future. Let's create a miracle together. Silence fell for 3 seconds, and then thunderous applause erupted. Chloe's lips curved in triumph. She shot me a smug glance that said, "You finally know your place." Xavier relaxed and patted my shoulder. Voice soft again. "I'm glad you've come around, Luna. That's what a real leader should be." I smiled back, though my heart was nothing but a graveyard of ice. Come around? Yes. I've come around completely. If persuasion is hell, then I'll personally shove each of you deeper into it. This life, I will no longer pay for your stupidity. I will watch with a smile as you march yourselves onto the scaffold of judgment. The revelry begins. Chloe stood at the center, worshipped like a queen, handing out those fatal paints to everyone herself. She deliberately came up to me and shoved the biggest jar into my hands, her tone dripping with condescension. "Luna, since you support me so much, this one with the most goes to you. You're the lead, make sure you paint the brightest, most eye-catching one." The girls behind her chimed in. "Yes, Leave too. Class rep, you have to paint well. Don't waste Chloe's kindness. If you mess it up, you'll ruin the whole class's image." I looked at their counterfeit smiles and felt a cold laugh curl inside me. Last life, when I earnestly begged them not to use that paint, they all wore the same faces, calling me jealous, calling me rigid. Now that I played along with their plan, they actually became more wary of me. Human nature is ridiculous. I took the paint and put on an expression of being flattered, my voice trembling with feigned excitement. "Thank you, Chloe. Thank you, everyone. I promise, I won't let you down." I hugged the jar like it was my life. Xavier watched me with approval and nodded. The suspicion in his eyes eased considerably. He probably thought I'd been completely bewitched by Chloe's charm, gladly reduced to a supporting role. The classmates began to work, using brushes to smear the viscous, chemically acrid liquid little by little onto their pristine dance dresses. As they painted, they fantasized about dazzling the stage. Every face shone with hopeful anticipation for the future. I took my dress and paint and moved to a corner. I remembered, from my last life after the tragedy, how I'd gone mad researching the paint's composition. Dry it might look harmless, but when exposed to high heat and human sweat it decomposed rapidly, releasing highly corrosive substances that caused irreversible chemical burns to the skin. And the hundreds of high-power stage lights were the perfect catalysts for that disaster. I opened the paint jar. The acrid smell churned my stomach, the memory of being burned by sulfuric acid held from the last life. I steadied myself, unscrewed a bottle of mineral water I'd prepared, and with a deliberate tremor of my hand, poured the whole bottle into the paint jar. "Ah!" I cried out, drawing everyone's gaze. I held the jar up in a panic. The liquid inside had become diluted and soupy. My water spilled in. What do I do? I was on the verge of tears, my face a mask of regret and helplessness. Chloe frowned and walked over. Seeing my foolishness, contempt spread across her face. "Luna, can you do anything right? You can't even handle such a simple thing." Xavier came up to her and sighed, his voice full of resignation. "Forget it, Chloe. Don't bother with her. Luna, don't paint, save us trouble." I looked at him ready to weep. "But, Undeleed, if I don't paint, the formation will be incomplete, it'll affect the whole performance." Chloe waved him off impatiently. "Fine, cutting so fell why Fine. Stand a bit further back. Dim the light a little, who'll even see you? Don't get in the way and ruin things for us." "Yeah. Don't bother painting." The others echoed. That was exactly what I wanted to hear. I bowed my head. My shoulders trembled like a pitiful creature abandoned and by the world. "I'm sorry. It's all my fault." Out of sight of them, The corner of my mouth curved into an ice-cold arc. I hugged the dress that had escaped harm and quietly slid aside, watching them cheerfully complete their masterpieces. In that corner a girl named Mia glanced at me timidly. Her family was poor. She was shy, unnoticed in class, often bossed around by Chloe's clique. Last life she suffered the worst burns without money for grafts, her whole face was raw and then she dropped out early. I remembered, when everyone ganged up on me. Only she had quietly said, "I don't think Senior Luna is like that." For that she was shoved to the ground by Chloe's followers and called a poor trash. Just as disliked as Luna. This life. I wouldn't let her be the sacrificial lamb again. While nobody was looking I went to her, lowered my voice, and said, "Can I borrow your dress for a moment?" She hesitated, then obediently handed it over. I took her dress behind a locker and, with practiced speed, swapped it with a clean, identical dress I'd brought from my bag. Then I stuffed her paint-smeared dress into the back of the locker. When I returned the clean dress I leaned in and murmured, "Mia, listen. This dress is your talisman. Tomorrow before you go on, no matter what anyone says, don't change out of it. Remember, don't ever change it." She looked puzzled but nodded firmly. After doing that I felt the whirlpool of hatred inside me loosen into a small, peaceful gap. Rehearsal ended and Xavier called after me. He handed me a bottle of water. A trace of apology on his face. "Luna. Today. Don't take their words to heart. Chloe doesn't mean harm. She's just blunt." I looked at his handsome face, the one I'd worshipped through my youth. It was the owner of that face who, last life, used the cruelest methods to torture me to death. I took the water and gave him a grateful smile. I know. Brother Xavier. How could I blame Chloe? She's doing it for the good of the whole team. My obedience and understanding pleased Xavier greatly. He tousled my hair the way he used to when we were children. "That's better. Come on. I'll walk you back to the dorm." "Walking?" he suddenly asked. "By the way, do you have some misunderstanding about me? I feel like you've been avoiding me lately." I sneered inwardly. "Avoiding you? I want nothing more than to grind you to dust." But my face stayed innocent. "No. Maybe rehearsals have been tiring lately." "Brother Xavier, are you and Chloe together?" I asked casually. Xavier's cheeks flushed slightly, and he awkwardly turned his head. "Don't say that. We're just getting along." "Getting along?" "More like getting into bed together. In my previous life, after I died, my soul lingered in the air, witnessing him and Chloe together in front of my parents' mourning hall." He said, "That idiot is finally dead. No one will be able to stop us anymore." Chloe giggled and replied, "You're amazing. You made her die so horribly, dragging her entire family down with her." It was the first time I realized how vile the human heart could truly be. I suppressed the boiling hatred and smiled. "You two make such a perfect pair. Chloe, you're so beautiful and talented. You're really made for him." My blessing made Xavier completely lower his guard. He thought I was still that silly girl, trailing behind him and obedient to everything he said. He had no idea that the girl smiling sweetly at him was plotting how to drag both him and his beloved Chloe into the deepest hell. The performance day arrived. Backstage, the dressing room was bustling with activity. Classmates were dressed in the performance costumes they had carefully decorated. The strange fluorescent glow shimmered under the lights, like poisonous snakes coiled around their bodies. They excitedly showed each other, exchanging praise as the atmosphere grew intensely charged. Chloe wore the dress with the most paint, looking like a proud princess, basking in the admiration of everyone. She walked over to me, looking down at my simple white dress, her lips curling into a sneer. "Luna, it's not too late to regret. You look so pitiful. I still have a little paint left. Would you like some?" I shook my head with genuine sincerity. "No, thank you, Chloe. You all are the red flowers. And I'm content being the green leaves, supporting your beauty." My words pleased her immensely. She turned to Xavier and said, "Xavier, see? I told you Luna is so understanding." Xavier looked at me, his gaze softening with a touch of approval. At that moment, Mia walked out of the dressing room. Her pristine white dress stood out starkly among the crowd of multicolored dancers. Chloe's face immediately darkened. She approached Mia and snapped. "Mia, what do you mean by this? Why didn't you paint your dress? Are you trying to ruin our entire team's efforts?" Mia trembled in fear, her voice barely a whisper. I just thought the original dress looked good." "You thought?" Chloe shrieked. "Who do you think you are? What right do you have to think? You're just a poor girl. And getting you into the performance was already a favor. How dare you go against us?" With that, she reached to tear Mia's dress off. I immediately stepped forward, standing in front of Mia. "Chloe, calm down. Maybe she didn't get enough paint yesterday and didn't have any left," I said, giving Mia a subtle look. Chloe sneered. "Not enough? I had more than enough prepared. I think she did this on purpose. Trying to be like Luna, acting all special to get attention." Xavier furrowed his brow and said to Mia. "Mia, now is not the time for selfishness. Go change your dress immediately." Mia looked like she might cry. Seeking my help, I sighed inwardly. It seemed like I wouldn't get past this without giving them a little more to chew on. I grabbed Mia's hand and turned to Chloe and Xavier. Chloe, head and filled wide sigh. "Xavier, you've misunderstood. It was actually my idea for Mia to keep her dress the way it is." Everyone froze. I calmly met their questioning gazes and explained. "Think about it. We're all wearing these bright, glowing costumes. Like a dazzling starry sky. But in a starry sky, doesn't the moon need to be there to provide balance and depth, to make the scene even more mesmerizing?" I paused for effect, watching them process my words. Then added, as the lead dancer, "It's a regret that I can't shine. So, I specifically asked Mia to stay as she is. She has a similar figure to mine. And during the formation changes, we'll create a visual harmony, one bright, one dark, one in front, one behind. It's a very advanced stage technique called moonlight reflected in the stars. When the judges see it, they'll immediately recognize the careful design and give us top marks." I said this with the utmost seriousness, as though the term moonlight reflected in the stars was the most natural thing in the world. The studio fell silent. Everyone was stunned by my theory. Moonlight reflected in the stars. That sounds amazing. Yeah. It feels so artistic. Chloe looked at me with skepticism. But Xavier's eyes lit up. He stared at me, his gaze full of admiration. "Luna, I didn't know you had this kind of thinking. This design. It really is brilliant." He made the final call. And even though Chloe might still have been dissatisfied, she had no choice but to swallow her resentment. She shot me a glare and muttered sorry, making things sound so complicated. I knew she was jealous. She thought the fluorescent costume was her idea alone. But now I had stolen her spotlight. And she must have been burning with frustration. But that was fine. Soon enough, she'd have no energy left for jealousy. The announcer's voice rang out. "Next, please enjoy the grand dance performance. The Chaser of Light. Brought to you by the Dance Department of North City Art Academy." I took a deep breath, leading Mia and the group of classmates heading toward their doom, onto the brightly lit stage. The music began. The spotlight hit me as I stood center stage, beginning my solo dance. My white dress spun with my movements, like a blooming snow lotus. In the audience, the school leaders, reporters from major media outlets, and many renowned figures from the art world sat watching. This was the live-streamed opening ceremony of the Academy's centennial celebration, North City Art Academy's grandest stage for showcasing its strength. And it would also be the best place to bury Chloe and Xavier. As the music reached its climax, the large curtain behind me slowly began to rise. Chloe, heading so filled wide sigh, leading 28 dancers, surged onto the stage like a wave. Just as they stepped into the spotlight, a miracle, or rather, a disaster unfolded. The scorching light from over 100 stage spotlights instantly illuminated their fluorescent dresses. "Wow!" A thunderous gasp rose from the audience. The dresses truly glowed, emitting a bizarre array of colors. Against the dark backdrop, they resembled a flowing galaxy. The visual effect was absolutely stunning. Chloe, hadn't fulfilled my obsession. At the front of the group, wore a triumphant smile. She shot me a provocative glance, her eyes brimming with pride. Xavier, seated in the first row of the VIP section, stood up excitedly, clapping furiously, his eyes fixed on Chloe as if she were his goddess. But that lasted for no more than 30 seconds. Ah! A piercing scream ripped through the triumphant music. A girl suddenly collapsed on the stage, clutching her dance dress and tearing at it in agony. Then came a second. A third. One scream after another rose, deafening and chaotic. The stage descended into utter madness. The once beautiful dresses, under the combined assault of heat and sweat, began to emit wisps of white smoke. A harsh, chemical stench filled the air, burning, acrid, suffocating. The fluorescent paint, like a venom suddenly awakened, devoured the dancers' skin with frantic hunger. On their arms, legs, backs, everywhere the paint had touched, angry red welts and blisters erupted, spreading at a terrifying speed. My face, it burns. Help, it's on fire. My dress is burning. Water. Please someone get water. 28 dancers flailed and screamed like fish tossed into boiling oil, writhing, rolling, crying out in unbearable pain. Some parts of their costumes had already been eaten through, revealing raw, bloodied flesh beneath the lace and sequins. The live stream camera captured every second of this descent into hell. Silence fell over the entire auditorium. Everyone was frozen, petrified by the horror unfolding before their eyes. The school administrators had gone pale as death. Xavier's smile stiffened and vanished, disbelief twisting his face as he stared at the stage at Chloe, who was shrieking in agony among the fallen. Chloe had suffered the worst burns of all. She'd used the most paint. Now, there wasn't an inch of unblemished skin left on her once beautiful face. Red blisters and yellow pus melded together into a grotesque mask more monstrous than any demon from hell. Only 2 people on that stage remained untouched. Me and the trembling girl lied shielded behind me. Mia. I stood amid the chaos and ruin. The music had stopped long ago. My dance was over. Now I simply stood there silent, composed as if an unfeeling judge, watching those who once condemned me sink into the hell they had built with their own hands. My face betrayed no emotion. But inside, I was laughing wildly, joyously. Do you see it now? This is your retribution. And it's only the beginning. Mia shook violently, gripping the hem of my dress, her body quivering with terror. I turned, gently patted her back, and whispered, "Don't be afraid. I'm here." My calmness was a blade of stillness cutting through the chaos around us. The live broadcast camera instinctively focused on me. Across millions of screens, the audience saw the same thing. A girl, the lead dancer, standing firm amid catastrophe. Not fleeing, but shielding her terrified companion. In that moment, I became the sole light within the tragedy. A perfect portrait of grace and victimhood. Staff finally snapped out of their shock, rushing onto the stage with fire extinguishers and stretchers. The opening ceremony was forcibly cut short. What was meant to be a grand celebration had turned into a national disaster. I was escorted backstage to the makeshift infirmary. Outside, cries of agony filled the air as doctors and nurses dashed about, their faces tight with panic. Chloe and Xavier were brought in soon after. Chloe had fainted from the pain. Her face was swathed in hasty layers of gauze, only her venomous eyes still visible. Xavier had a minor burn on his arm, but his concern was entirely for Chloe. He stayed beside her bed, eyes filled with fury and grief. When he saw Mia and me walk in unharmed, that fury instantly found its target. He lunged forward, grabbed my collar, and roared into my face, eyes bloodshot. "Luna, was it you? Was it you who did this?" His strength nearly lifted me off the ground. I feigned fear, trembling in his grip. "Brother Xavier, what are you saying? I don't understand." "Stop pretending," he bellowed, spittle flying. "Why are you and that girl the only ones unharmed? Admit it, you switched the paint. You were jealous of Chloe, jealous of her talent, her popularity. So you destroyed her. You destroyed all of us." The accusation was identical to the one from my previous life. At this time, I was no longer the desperate girl who could only cry and beg for mercy. I let him clutch me. Tears shimmering in my eyes. My voice trembling with grievance and fear. I really didn't. Mia, shaking but resolute, stepped forward. Gordon. Let go of Luna-senpai. It wasn't her. It was Mize. It was Chloe who told us to use the paint. Shut up. Xavier roared, shoving her aside. Her frail body hit the wall with a dull thud. You think you get to speak here? You're with her. At that moment, the principal and the department head stormed in. Their faces thunderous. Enough. The principal barked. Xavier. What do you think you're doing? Xavier finally released me but continued glaring. Poison in his gaze. He turned to the principal, pointing at me, voice trembling with outrage. Principal. Director, it was her. Luna. She did this on purpose. She wanted first place, she wanted to ruin Chloe. She's the culprit. The principal's expression darkened. The incident had already spiraled out of control. The school needed someone to take the blame. And I, unscathed and different, was the perfect scapegoat. His eyes hard, and as he looked at me. Luna. He said coldly. Explain yourself. We need the truth. Dozens of accusing eyes bore into me. Sharp as blades. They were all waiting for me to confess, to offer myself up for punishment. I took a slow breath, wiped the tears from my lashes, and lifted my head to meet his gaze. My voice was soft, but each word rang clear. Principal. I didn't harm anyone. In fact, I was almost the one who got harmed. I paused, letting my eyes sweep across Xavier and then to Chloe, whose venomous glare burned to the gauze. Because during rehearsal, I discovered that the paint Chloe brought was wrong. My words detonated like a bomb in the cramped infirmary. Chloe jerked upright, pain twisting her features as she screamed hoarsely. You're lying. Luna. You filthy liar. Xavier shouted right after her. You're twisting everything. You were the one who praised her idea, you even encouraged everyone to use it. Now that something's gone wrong, you want to blame Chloe? I didn't think you could be this vicious. The principal and director exchanged grim looks, their expressions tightening. It was clear they trusted Xavier and Chloe far more than they would ever trust me. After all, he was the student council's vice president, and she the school's beloved goddess, while I was just a bookish dancer, a quiet, faceless nobody. And, with so many people witnessing how I supported Chloe back then, my current defense sounded nothing more than a weak excuse. I ignored their jeers and simply stared calmly at the principal. Principal. Whether what I'm saying is true or not, it can be easily verified. The reason I didn't speak up at that time was because I had no evidence. I was afraid that even if I did speak, no one would believe me. And I'd only be seen as jealous, as someone trying to create trouble. My words were reasonable. As an ordinary student, without solid evidence, it was hard to challenge someone as influential as Chloe. The principal's brow relaxed slightly. I continued. At that time, the only thing I could do was minimize the damage in my own way. I purposely knocked over some water, wetting my paint, and made it impossible for myself to apply it. That was step one. Then, let out a low sigh. Seeing that Mia is introverted and fearing she would be bullied, I used the moonlight reflected in the stars, excuse to tell her not to apply the paint. This was the best I could do, the biggest remedy I could offer. I looked at Mia, and she nodded vigorously, like a chick pecking at rice. Yes, yes. It was the senior who protected me. Xavier scoffed. Nonsense. You're making up excuses now. Who can prove you noticed the problem with the paint back then? I can. I looked directly into his eyes, each word deliberate. Because I kept the evidence. Everyone froze. Even Xavier's expression showed surprise. I carefully pulled out a small piece of fabric from my dance shoe, sealed in a bag, with paint still on it. It was a tiny piece I secretly cut off Mia's dress when I changed it yesterday. This is a sample of the paint Chloe brought last night. I sent it to an external professional testing agency, and rushed to have the composition analyzed. As I spoke, I pulled up an email on my phone. The report just came in, and I think it'll explain everything that happened today. I handed my phone to the principal. On the screen was an authoritative report from the havoc Precision Testing Center. At the bottom of the report, in bold red letters, the conclusion was clearly stated. The submitted sample contains a high concentration of xylene and ethyl acetate, both highly corrosive, volatile industrial solvents, which pose serious harm to human skin and respiratory systems. Direct contact with the skin is strictly prohibited. The infirmary was dead silent. The air seemed to freeze. The principal and the director turned pale, then green, then purple, their faces shifting like a color palette. They stared at the report, their hands beginning to tremble. Industrial solvents. Highly corrosive. This was no mere safety incident, it was a malicious poisoning case. Chloe's face drained of color completely. She collapsed onto the bed, her lips trembling, unable to say a word. She never expected that I had kept such a backup. Xavier was stunned. He looked at the report, then at me. His eyes filled with shock and disbelief. He probably couldn't understand how this pure and foolish girl in his eyes could have orchestrated such a meticulous plan. No way. He muttered. Chloe. How could she have used something like this? She's also a victim. Oh? Is that so? I took back my phone and coldly looked at him. Whether she's a victim or not, she's the only one who knows. But I can tell you for sure, she's not as clueless about the paint as she claims. I turned toward Chloe, whose face was ashen, and moved in for the kill. Chloe, do you dare to tell everyone where you got this so-called imported paint from? Do you dare give us the contact of your uncle, who works abroad? Or should I say, your uncle actually runs a chemical factory on the outskirts of North City. One that doesn't even have a production license. A factory with no qualifications? Each question landed like a heavy blow, striking Chloe's heart mercilessly. Her body began to shake violently. Her eyes filled with terror. She knew I knew everything. In my past life, after the incident, Xavier used his family connections to suppress the whole affair. They bribed the workers at the chemical factory, destroyed all the evidence, and pinned the blame on a temporary worker for a workplace accident. Chloe had been nothing but an innocent victim the whole time. But this time, I wouldn't give her any chance. You're lying. Chloe struggled one last time. I don't know what you're talking about. The paint was brought by my uncle from abroad. Really? I sneered. That's too bad. When I sent the sample for testing yesterday, I also asked a friend at the testing center to check the batch number of the paint. Guess what? There's no record of that batch number anywhere in the world. I paused, savoring the look of despair on her face, then delivered the final blow. But I did find a perfect match for the batch number on a local industrial materials trading website in North City. The supplier is Hong Fa Fine Chemicals. The legal representative is Jeffrey. Chloe. If I'm not mistaken, that's your uncle's name, right? Boom. Chloe's mind exploded. Her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed again, fainting for the second time. This time, I couldn't tell if it was from the pain or the shock. Xavier was completely stunned. He stood there, staring at me like I was some kind of monster. His proud family background, his self-declared intelligence, all seemed so ridiculous and vulnerable in front of my ironclad evidence. The principal and the director finally snapped out of their shock. Their gazes shifted from anger to fear. They both knew what this meant if it got out. The century-long reputation of North City Art Academy would be destroyed in an instant. And they, as the school leaders, would be held accountable. The principal took a deep breath, and his expression became complicated as he looked at me. There was shock, wariness, but most of all, a calculating cleverness, like he was thinking about how to use me. He walked toward me, his tone almost friendly as he spoke. Luna, this time, we owe you so much. Not only did you protect yourself and your classmates, but you also spared the school from a much larger disaster. Don't worry. The school will never wrong an innocent person, and it will never let a guilty one go unpunished. He spoke with righteous conviction, but his eyes subtly flicked toward Chloe, still lying unconscious on the bed. We will immediately call the police and let them handle this. As the whistleblower, The school will commend and reward you. I listened to his words. A cold laugh bubbling inside me. Commend? Reward? How nicely put. He was simply trying to silence me, to minimize the damage this incident would cause. But that suited me just fine. My goal wasn't to destroy the school. My goal was to destroy the damn people. I lowered my head, pretending to be overwhelmed with gratitude. Thank you, Principal. I believe the school will give me a fair resolution. The principal nodded approvingly. He immediately called the security staff to seal off the infirmary, then stepped outside to make the police call. The infirmary was now left with just me, Mia, Xavier, and the unconscious Chloe. Xavier finally snapped out of his stupor. He glared at me, his voice hoarse, filled with resentment. Luna, you have such a cruel heart. I lifted my head and met his gaze. Smiling. Cruel? Compared to what you and she did to me. What's this little thing? He froze. What do you mean? I didn't answer him directly. Instead, I slowly walked up to him, lowering my voice to a volume only the two of us could hear, speaking softly. Xavier, do you remember the big fire in the back mountains? His pupils shrank suddenly. Xavier's face went deathly pale in an instant. He looked at me as if he had seen a ghost, his lips trembling, unable to say a single word. The back mountains. The fire. It was a secret from our past life, shared only by those of us deemed culprits. How could I know about this? I watched the terror flood his face, and a sense of dark pleasure surged inside me. I wanted him to know no. I had come back, and I had returned with the fires of hell, ready to claim their lives one by one. I stepped closer, the smile at the corner of my mouth colder than ever. Do you remember that thick needle for sewing cloths? The bottle of sulfuric acid? And that piece of glowing charcoal? Its smell, truly unbearable. My voice was as light as a feather, but to his ears, it weighed a ton. Who are you? Xavier's voice trembled, laced with fear and confusion. He began to wonder if this Luna before him had been possessed by something dark. I didn't respond to him anymore, because I knew, from this moment on, the seed of fear had already taken root in his heart. He would never find peace. He would live in perpetual suspicion and terror. I gave him my first little appetizer. The police arrived shortly after. With them came reporters from several major media outlets. It seemed the principal also wanted to use the media to shift the blame, painting the school as an innocent victim and pinning everything on the irresponsible merchant and a few individual students. Chloe was taken away by the police. She had regained consciousness, but her eyes were blank, like a puppet whose soul had been sucked out. As she passed by me, I could clearly see the venomous hatred in her eyes. Good. I wanted her to hate me, because the hatred before despair was the most excruciating kind. Xavier, as an important party, was also taken away for further questioning. As he left, he shot me a deep, complicated look, fear, resentment, and a hint of pleading all mixed together. How laughable. Now you're afraid? It's too late. Mia and I, as victims and key witnesses, also went to the police station to give our statements. I methodically outlined everything I had prepared, including how I had discovered the problem with the paint, how I had kept samples, how I had orchestrated the moonlight story sequence for self-preservation, and how I had urgently asked a friend to expedite the inspection. My account was flawless. Before the police and reporters, I perfectly crafted the image of a calm, intelligent, and brave hero who had saved herself and her classmates with her knowledge in a time of crisis. Mia, with a tearful voice, confirmed everything I had said. She told everyone how I had protected her, comforted her, and told her not to be afraid. In an instant, I became the hot topic online. Most beautiful lead dancer at Bichang Art Academy. Textbook self-rescue. The goddess of intelligence and beauty. Praise rained down on me like snowflakes. The dirt thrown on me in my previous life had now transformed into glory, draping over me like a fine mantle. Meanwhile, Chloe and her uncle's chemical factory had become public enemies. Everyone wanted them gone. Unethical businesses, playing with human lives. These people deserve the death penalty. That Chloe is a heartless villain. The online outrage was deafening. Under the immense pressure of public opinion, the police worked with unusual efficiency. That very afternoon, Jeffrey's Hong Fa Fine Chemicals factory was raided and shut down. In the warehouse, police found a large amount of counterfeit and substandard chemical products. It turned out Jeffrey had been profiting from this deceitful business scheme, selling dangerous goods under false labels for years. He had used his connections to remain untouched for so long. But he never expected that this time he'd run into a brick wall. A wall forged in hell and laced with venom. Jeffrey and Chloe were formally detained by the police on charges of producing and selling counterfeit products and causing serious injury by negligence. They would face severe legal consequences. At this point, everything seemed to be winding down. But I knew this was far from over. Chloe and her uncle were just the appetizers. My main course, Xavier, had yet to be served. The Gordon family was well known in Chang. Xavier's father, Gordon, was the chairman of a listed company with extensive connections. In my previous life, it was he who used his influence to suppress everything. This time, although Jeffrey's family had fallen, I knew that with Gordon's power, extracting Xavier from this mess wouldn't be difficult. After all, Xavier had never been directly involved. At most, he was just an unwitting bystander, not even an accomplice. How could I let him get off so easily? I returned to my dorm, opened my laptop. I hacked into the old server of Hong Fa Fine Chemicals. After my death in the last life, my soul wandered aimlessly for a long time. And with nothing else to do, I learned many things. For example, how to be a top-tier hacker. Soon enough, I found what I was looking for in a pile of encrypted financial documents. A transfer record. A transfer of $5 million from the secret account of Hong Fa Fine Chemicals to another company account, and the recipient's company name was NSA Industries. The chairman of NSA Industries was none other than Xavier's father, Gordon. It turned out there was a dirty business relationship between them. Jeffrey was responsible for producing the illicit chemicals, while Gordon's company digested these substances, using them in their own construction and renovation projects, passing them off as quality materials to make a huge profit. What a delightful surprise. I encrypted the transfer record and related contract files, then sent them via an anonymous email to the most famous financial journalist in North City, known for his impartiality and skill in dealing with hard-hitting cases. After completing this, I closed my laptop, lay down on my bed, and closed my eyes. I could already imagine what would happen when this evidence became public. The Gordon family would face utter ruin. I could even hear Xavier's desperate cries. It felt absolutely wonderful. The next day, I received an unexpected phone call. It was from Xavier. His voice sounded tired and hoarse. "Luna, can we meet?" He asked to meet me at the school CAF. When I arrived, he was already there. He looked much more worn out, with dark bags under his eyes. The once confident young man now looked like a defeated rooster. He saw me. His gaze complex. After struggling for a long time, he finally spoke. "Luna, I'm sorry." He was actually apologizing. "It was my fault with Chloe. I shouldn't have doubted you without reason, wrongly accusing you. I apologize." He stood up and bowed deeply to me. If I were still the naive Luna from my past life, maybe I would have been moved by his gesture. But now, I only felt disgust. I picked up my coffee and took a slow sip, without saying anything. Seeing my lack of response, he grew anxious. "Luna, I know it's too late to say anything now. But Chloe, she's already learned her lesson. Her family's ruined. Look, could you?" He hesitated, then finally said what he was really after. "Could you tell the police that you forgive her? Or just say she was young and confused? If you're willing to sign a letter of forgiveness, she could get a lighter sentence." I set down my coffee cup, raised my head, and smiled. My smile made him uneasy. "Xavier, why do you think I would agree to that?" He froze. I stood up and looked down at him, each word deliberate. "I won't just not sign a letter of forgiveness. I'll hire the best lawyer and file both a criminal and civil lawsuit against her for intentional harm. I want her to rot in prison. You? He trembled with anger. Luna. Do you have to go this far? Show some mercy. Show mercy? I laughed like I'd heard the greatest joke. To hear that from you, Xavier, is truly ironic. I leaned in and whispered in his ear. So only the two of us could hear. Xavier. How's the fire on the back hill? His face drained of color once again. I straightened up, coldly staring at him. Go back and tell your father to get the money ready. Because soon, the Gordon family will need a lawyer too. With that, I turned and walked away, leaving him alone to sink slowly into the abyss of fear. The scandal shook the entire city of North City. Shocking. Listed company and A Industries involved in massive financial misconduct with a shady chemical factory. Government business collusion? Unveiling the protection behind Hong Fa chemical factory. From the school celebration tragedy to the corporate dark side, how far are we from the truth? Each report struck at the heart of the Gordon family like a sharp knife. A Industries stock plummeted, losing billions of market value within 3 days. Furious shareholders gathered outside A Industries' office building, holding banners, demanding answers from Gordon. The joint investigative team, consisting of tax, industry, environmental, and police departments, stormed into A Industries with thunderous force. The Gordon family's world had collapsed. Gordon, frantic and desperate, went to every possible connection, only to find that those once close friends now avoided him like the plague. When the wall falls, everyone pushes. That's the harsh reality. A week later, the investigation results were released. Gordon was arrested on charges of tax evasion, illegal business practices, commercial bribery, and more. A Industries was ordered to shut down and undergo an overhaul. A massive fine and bankruptcy liquidation were imminent. I saw the news footage of Gordon being led away in handcuffs. His hair was graying, his face defeated, no longer the proud man he once was. Meanwhile, I sat by the window in the school library, basking in the warm sunlight, reading a book about the history of ballet. I watched as the news showed Xavier crying and chasing after the police car, his heart-connecting wails. It was truly a delightful sight. My phone vibrated. It was a text from an unfamiliar number. Luna, I beg you, please let our family go. It was Xavier. I smiled, deleted the message, and turned my phone to silent. I didn't want to be disturbed while reading by this garbage. Another month passed. Chloe and her uncle's trial began. As the plaintiff, I attended the hearing. Seeing Chloe again, she had completely changed. Though the scars on her face had been treated, they still looked ghastly. She was wearing prison clothes, handcuffed, her hair dry and yellow, her eyes hollow, like a flower that had completely withered. She saw me. As she saw me sitting in the plaintiff's seat, dressed in an elegant suit, with exquisite makeup and a radiant appearance. The lifeless fire in her eyes suddenly flared into a wild, crazed blaze. Luna, you bitch. You're the one who ruined me. It's all your fault. She screamed, like a madwoman, trying to break free from the bailiff's grip and lunge at me. The courtroom was thrown into chaos. A judge slammed the gavel and shouted in authority. Throughout it all, I remained calm, my gaze fixed on her, even wearing a faint, almost imperceptible smile. Your pain is my greatest solace. In the end, Jeffrey was convicted of multiple crimes and sentenced to life imprisonment. As for Chloe, my lawyer provided a mountain of evidence of her malicious intent, coupled with her lack of remorse, and she was ultimately sentenced to 15 years in prison for intentional injury. 15 years. By the time she's released, she'll be nearing 40. Her life, as she knew it, would be ruined. The moment the verdict was read, she completely broke down, collapsing to the floor like a puddle of mush. Meanwhile, I stood, and amidst the complex gazes of the crowd, I walked out of the courtroom with my head held high. Standing by the door was one person. Xavier. He looked even more haggard than when I had last seen him. He wore a wrinkled, cheap t-shirt, his hair greasy, His face unshaven, eyes hollow, looking like a homeless man. When he saw me, there was no trace of hatred. No fear in his eyes, just a kind of dead, hopeless despair. Luna. His voice rasped, sounding as though it had been ground down by sandpaper. I stopped and turned to face him. Why? He asked, as if he was questioning me, but also questioning himself. We grew up together, didn't we? When we were kids, I helped you chase off the bullies. On your birthday, I spent half a year's worth of pocket money to buy you your favorite music box. Why? Why did you do this to me? To my family? He spoke of those distant memories, almost forgotten by me. And memories I had once treasured, now felt so bitter and ironic. I looked at him, and a bitter laugh escaped me. Xavier, do you think it's too late for you to bring this up? I walked slowly toward him, each step pressing down on his heart. You helped me chase off bullies. But in the end, you became the worst of them all. You gave me a music box. But in the end, you crushed my throat with your own hands. You asked me why. I stopped in front of him, looked directly into his murky eyes, and spoke each word slowly, deliberately. Because in the last life, you and Chloe lured me to the back mountains, destroyed my face with sulfuric acid, burned through my throat with charcoal, and sewed my costume into my flesh with a thick needle. Because you stood by, watching as wild wolves tore me apart, and recorded it and destroyed my parents' lives. Because you opened my door with your own hands, letting your mentally unstable future mother-in-law butcher my parents in the living room, one stab at a time. Xavier. Now, you tell me, why should I not do the same to you? Each word struck him like an invisible hammer, landing hard on his soul. His body began to tremble uncontrollably. His face turned from deathly gray to a sickly pale, and then to a deep purple. You. He pointed at me, his throat making a strangled sound, but no words came out. He remembered. He remembered the words I had said to him at the CAF, and finally, he understood that was not his hallucination, nor my empty threat. It was real. This woman before him. She came back from hell, carrying with her the deep grudge of 2 lifetimes, to collect her debt from him. With a thud, his legs gave way, and he dropped to his knees in front of me. He clung to my legs, crying uncontrollably, like a stray dog. I was wrong. Luna. I was really wrong. Please. For the sake of our childhood, spare me. He kept bowing his head, again and again, his forehead soon bleeding from the repeated blows. Passers-by stopped, glancing at the scene with curiosity. I frowned in disgust and kicked him away. Spare you? I squatted down, grabbed his chin, and forced him to look me in the eye. How to hell? And ask my parents if they'll spare you. I watched the light die out in his eyes, and I smiled with satisfaction. I stood up, not sparing him another glance, and turned to walk toward the brilliant sunlight. Behind me, his hysterical, fearful, stealthy, and desperate laughter echoed. I knew he had lost his mind. I had driven him to madness with my own hands. This was the final celebration I had prepared for them all. My phone rang. It was my mother. You. Is everything over? Your dad made your favorite sweet and sour ribs. We're waiting for you to come home for dinner. The familiar, warm voice on the other end made my eyes instantly well up with tears. I sniffed, trying to make my voice sound just like it always had. It's over. Mom, I'll be home soon. I hung up and looked up at the sky, as blue as the sea. Dad, Mom, can you see? Your daughter has avenged you. In my past life, my boyfriend Kyle wanted to donate a kidney to his childhood sweetheart Chloe. I looked at his frail body, so weak that he could barely stand, and tried to persuade him not to do it. However, unexpectedly, Chloe suffered from kidney rejection. She only managed to live for 2 months before passing away. Later, Kyle became the new domineering CEO, a comment row referring to a powerful, authoritative business leader. And I became the envy of everyone, the CEO's wife. But on the anniversary of his childhood sweetheart's death, he strangled me to death. Stella, if you hadn't stopped me, Chloe wouldn't have died. he said. Everything that happened to you is of your own doing. He held me in a tight stranglehold, then threw me into the sea to feed the fish. In the end, I became food for the ocean's creatures. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back on the day my boyfriend planned to donate his kidney. This time, I would never stop him. 1. Stella. I want to donate a kidney to Chloe. She's my childhood sweetheart, I can't just watch her die. Kyle said anxiously, his eyes looking at me earnestly. I promise you, I'll be fine. I simply smiled and replied, hurry up, then. Don't waste any time. In my past life, the anniversary of Chloe's death happened to be the first anniversary of Kyle and me being together. I had dressed up specially, putting on my favorite white dress, and went to the dinner we'd planned. When I walked into Kyle's room, it was pitch black. I felt confused. Kyle, why didn't you turn on the lights? I asked. I forgot. He replied. His calm voice came from beside the dining table in the darkness, sounding eerie in the silence. I didn't think much of it. Assuming he was just upset about work, I reached for the light switch on the wall. But no matter how hard I pressed it, the lights wouldn't come on. Is the light broken? I wondered aloud, walking toward Kyle only to be met with despair. Take a good look at who's on the floor, he said. In the dark, I leaned in to see. To my horror, Chloe was lying on the ground, her face as pale as a ghost. I was so shocked that I stumbled and fell to the floor. Chloe, wasn't she dead? I stammered. Kyle suddenly grabbed my head and pressed it against the dining table. From the corner of my eye, I could still see Chloe on the floor. She's not dead, but you'll be dead soon, he said. Kyle glared at me fiercely, his eyes filled with hatred, and tightened his grip on my head. Only then did I realize, he had hated me all along. He had gone crazy. Chloe had long been dead, yet her body was still intact, her appearance unchanged. I had no idea how he'd managed that. A sharp pain shot through my scalp. You're insane. I couldn't help but curse. I struggled to fight back. But Kyle was no longer the frail man he used to be. I couldn't resist him at all. He wrapped his arms around my neck from behind and choked me. His vicious voice rang in my ears. Now I'll make you for her. If you hadn't stopped me, Chloe would still be alive. You ruined my whole life. You vicious woman. I felt my breath growing more and more labored. But my heart was filled with unwillingness. In the end, he threw me into the sea. I sneered. This life, I'd wait and see who would be the one to regret. I hoped they'd be stuck with each other forever, and not harm anyone else. Ring. 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 My phone lit up. I glanced at the screen. It was Kyle's mother. Lena. I let out a cold laugh, but answered the call anyway, curious to see what trick she was up to. Hello? Get to City First Hospital right now. Lena snapped, her voice arrogant. I stared at my manicured nails calmly and slowly spoke 3 words. Why should I? You lowly woman. Do you still want to marry into the Kyle family? Lena screamed, unable to believe that the person who had always obeyed her unconditionally was now talking back. I hung up the phone immediately. If I guessed right, Kyle's body definitely couldn't handle a kidney removal. Kyle had the rare and a blood Rh null blood type, and coincidentally, so did I. She wanted me to be Kyle's blood bag. What a dream. I thought back to my past life. Kyle and I had fallen in love freely while we were in college. One day, Kyle asked me to meet his parents. Back then, I was overjoyed, thinking that not all wealthy families looked down on poor people. I came from an ordinary family. My parents were both regular office workers, and they didn't approve of my relationship with Kyle. Stella, marriage should be between people of equal social status. That's how it's always been, they'd said. But I thought my parents were being old-fashioned, so I went against their wishes. I spent all the money I'd earned from part-time jobs to buy expensive gifts, hoping to win his parents' approval. I followed behind Kyle, carrying all the gifts in my hands. My palms were red from the strain. But I didn't care at all, staring at the villa in front of me. I took deep breaths, feeling nervous. Finally, Kyle grew impatient and urged me, hurry up. My parents are already waiting. I hurried to catch up with him. When the door opened, I saw Kyle sitting on the sofa. Next to him was a delicate-looking girl who kept coughing. Kyle patted her back gently, as if he hadn't even noticed I'd arrived. I put the gifts on the floor and called out cautiously, "Hello, Auntie." I reached out to tug on Kyle's sleeve, hoping he'd speak up to break the awkward silence. But instead, he walked over and sat down on the sofa, looking completely indifferent. The girl beside him took Kyle's arm and said in a sweet, soft voice, "Why were you gone so long? Auntie and I missed you." Kyle stroked her hair and smiled fondly. I was the only one left drowning in awkwardness. Finally, Ted in so Feldmeier. The woman sitting on the sofa spoke slowly. "You must be Kyle's friend, right? This is Kyle's fiancée, Chloe. They've been engaged since they were kids." I was confused. Kyle had a fiancée? Why had he never mentioned her to me? "Hello, sister. I'm Chloe," the girl said, standing up and looking at me with innocent eyes. She spoke while coughing, looking as fragile as a trembling little white flower. She gradually walked closer to me and whispered in my ear, her voice sharp with malice, "Kyle is mine." I was startled and took a step back instinctively. But Chloe stumbled and fell to the ground. "What did you do? Don't you know Chloe is in poor health?" Kyle shouted at me angrily. Watching Kyle look at Chloe with such concern, I couldn't even tell whose boyfriend he was anymore. I didn't bother explaining. I just ran out the door. By then, it was pouring rain, and I must have looked utterly miserable. Even so, I still clung to delusions about Kyle back then. I kept thinking about how he'd taken care of me so thoughtfully, and I just couldn't bring myself to let go. I kept trying to curry favor with his family, deluding myself that I could win their approval. 3. Thinking back to how stupid I'd been in my past life, I became even more determined and not to stop Kyle from donating his kidney. When I returned to school, I listened attentively in class as if I'd become a completely different person. Zoe, who was sitting next to me, was shocked. She shook my arm and asked, "Why aren't you skipping class to go out with Kyle today?" "I've come to my senses," I replied calmly. Zoe looked at me in disbelief. "You finally saw through that scumbag? I told you. Lily saw him hugging another girl. But you didn't believe me at the time." I nodded. "I believe you now." When the class bell rang, I went back to the dormitory and saw Lily packing her things. When she saw me, she frowned and said angrily, "Are you happy now? I'm moving out. You can stay with your precious Kyle." She grabbed her suitcase and prepared to leave. I quickly stopped her. I remembered that in my past life, Lily had also warned me that Kyle was a scumbag, but instead of believing her, I'd had a huge fight with her and lost a good friend. Thinking about it now, I felt so stupid. "I believe you, I believe you," I said firmly, placing my hand on her suitcase to stop her. "What?" Lily was stunned. "Did you take the wrong medicine?" She reached out to feel my forehead, confused. "You don't have a fever." "I see him clearly now," I said, looking at Lily, who was standing by the door. "Can we still be good friends?" "Who said we weren't? The three of us are best friends. Remember?" Lily laughed and gave me a big hug. Now that I thought about it, it really wasn't worth it throwing away a good friendship for a scumbag. My phone lit up again. It was Kyle's mother once more. I hung up immediately, without hesitation, and blocked her number. But right after that, countless calls started pouring in one after another, as if they would keep ringing until I answered. I grew annoyed and finally picked up. "Stella, dear. Auntie was being stupid earlier. I said some things I shouldn't have. Don't take it too hard. Okay?" Lena's voice on the other end was full of flattery. I spoke coldly, "Just say what you want. My son is in the city hospital right now. His life is in danger, and we can't find a matching blood donor. Can you come over right now? We'll give you anything you want," Lena said anxiously. To anyone who didn't know the truth, she would have sounded like nothing more than a worried mother. "Fine," having Fostel wide sigh, I said, replying with just one word before hanging up quickly. "You lied to me. Didn't you say you didn't like that scumbag anymore?" Lily my hand, looking angry. "Yeah, Stella. You said you didn't like him anymore. So he added, standing by the door and questioning me. I hurried to explain, I just want to go see how pathetic Vet's comeback looks. I will never repeat the mistakes of my past life. 4. At the city hospital, I asked a nurse for Kyle's room number. Before I even knocked on the door, I heard Lena wailing inside. My poor son. Why did you have to donate a kidney to Chloe? We already promised to find her another kidney donor, why did you still do this? She cried. And her voice turned cold and vicious. That lowly woman still wants to marry into the Kyle family? She's dreaming. When she gets here, she has to donate blood to my son. I let out a cold laugh outside the door, then pushed it open. When Lena saw me, she forced an awkward smile. Stella. You're here. Come sit down. I didn't hesitate to sit in the chair she pointed to. Auntie. Why are you being so polite today? I asked, putting on a confused expression. Lena clenched her fists in anger, but she didn't dare say a word to blame me. I looked at Kyle lying on the hospital bed. His face was pale, and he was still unconscious. His already frail body looked even weaker now, was thin and fragile as a sheet of paper. Stella. Look at Kyle lying there. He needs blood urgently. Lena said. But it'll take some time to find a donor. I was wondering. Could you donate blood to Kyle? I smiled. But memories of Lena's arrogance in my past life flashed through my mind. After I'd visited their family back then, my parents had been threatened. At the time, I'd returned home in a daze. My father, Solomon, had a serious expression on his face, and his eyes were filled with disappointment as he looked at me. Did you meet them? Do you still like him? He asked. I think father was worried after all. Our family backgrounds were worlds apart. I hesitated, then said. And he doesn't really like me. But I trust Kyle. As soon as I finished speaking, father let out a deep sigh and shook his head. Mother, Chloe, also disagreed. She'd reached the end of her patience. I'm telling you, if you insist on being with him, you might as well pretend you don't have a mother like me, she said. And I'll pretend I never had a daughter like you. When she finished, mother's eyes turned red, and tears welled up in them. I stepped forward to hug her, confused about what had happened. A sob caught in mother's throat as she cried and said, The Kyle family. They're not leaving us any way out. I was shocked. I patted mother's back and asked, What's going on? They sent an envelope to our company. It said if you keep pestering Kyle, they'll blacklist us in the industry. She replied. At the time, I could barely believe it. I only comforted mother, thinking I'd go find Kyle to get an explanation. But fortune turns quickly. I stood up abruptly, handed Lena a piece of letter paper, and spoke coldly. Today, I'm here to break up with Kyle. And if Auntie harasses me again, don't blame me for being rude. Only Kyle, staring at the letter in his hand, saw what was written on it. Kyle cheated with Chloe. They're a pair of scumbag and homewrecker. May you two stay stuck together forever, and stop ruining other people's lives. Staring at the words, Kyle pointed at my nose. Too furious to speak, I left calmly, only hearing the sound of something heavy falling behind me. A secret sense of satisfaction welled up in my heart. 5. When I got home, I told my parents the good news about breaking up with Kyle. Their faces lit up with joy, though at first they could hardly believe it. After all, they knew just how infatuated I'd been with him. Seeing that I'd really ended things with him, they couldn't help but be happy. They even cooked a whole table of delicious dishes. As I ate the braised chicken in my bowl, I couldn't help but think, Kyle was really good at manipulating people. In my past life, back in school, I was outstanding but had very few friends, let alone male friends. It was precisely because my social circle was so simple that Kyle targeted me. He launched an intense pursuit. Attending to every little detail, he remembered my menstrual cycle, ran back in the rain to get an umbrella for me, and helped the stray cats on campus. He and I soon fell head over heels in love. I thought I was the happiest person in the world. But later, I gradually changed under Kyle's influence. I started skipping classes with him and neglecting my studies. At first, I was reluctant. Design had always been my dream, but I was blinded by the lies Kyle wove. I ignored my friends' objections, my parents' protests, and my teacher's advice. At some point, he changed and my eyes turned into such a shameless person. A sleazy man who flirted with other girls. So he'd been that kind of person all along. He'd just hidden it so well. Lying in bed, thinking about Kyle's miserable state today, I couldn't help but feel happy. This time, he'd chosen to donate a kidney to her. But now, he was unconscious. His future uncertain. I cursed under my breath. Serves you right. A wave of satisfaction washed over me. The scumbag and the homewrecker could stay stuck together forever. I drifted off to sleep, feeling completely at ease. Half a month passed before I knew it. I studied hard and got first place in my major in the final exams. Holding the dress I designed in my hand, I imagined how beautiful the girl who wore it would look. Just thinking about it made me happy. I picked up the design sketch again and kept revising it until a ringtone interrupted me. Looking at the glowing screen, I almost forgot about him. I answered the call, and a hoarse voice came through. "Stella, can you come see me? I miss you." In my past life, I would have been tricked by his sweet words, truly believing he missed me, not that he wanted my blood. I let out a cold laugh. "Didn't your mom tell you we already broke up?" "No. I don't believe it. You loved me so much, how could you break up with me?" Kyle's voice was filled with disbelief. As if I was obligated to love a jerk like him for the rest of my life. His words made me sick. I cut him off. "Do you really not know you're a scumbag? Why are you pretending to be affectionate now? You hooked up with other girls at school. And you were with Chloe too. Did you really think you could get away with that?" Hearing me say this, he dropped the act. "If I hadn't known you had panda blood back then, I would never have been with you," he snapped. "Get to the hospital right now to save me, or you'll regret it." I hung up immediately and blocked his number. His voice was disgusting. Did he really think I'd regret it? 6. I gathered information about the Kyle family and anonymously sent it to the authorities. The documents were filled with details of how the Kyle family used underhanded tactics to seek personal gain, oppressing employees, offering no pay for a 7-day trial period, forcing unpaid overtime. There was even evidence that King, the chairman of the Kyle group, had sexually harassed female employees, falsified accounts, and embezzled company funds at will. This was more than enough to get them into big trouble. Thinking back to my past life, for Kyle, I'd given up my dream, switched to a finance major, and uncovered loopholes in the company. The Kyle family had seemed to be at the peak of their prosperity. But in reality, they were falling apart from the inside. King had handed the mess of Goose Market to Kyle, but how could a spoiled playboy like Kyle support the entire Kyle family? If I hadn't studied finance hard, negotiated with people over drinks until I got stomach bleeding, and won project after project, the Kyle family would never have become so prosperous in my past life. With Kyle's fame, he'd been called the youngest and most capable CEO. Back then, even when I had stomach bleeding, I'd still been willing to do it. Yet all he'd given me was a lowly secretary position. "Stella, I think you're the perfect fit for my secretary," he'd said. "I don't trust anyone else with the job." I'd agreed foolishly, having feel flight, truly believing his words, believing Kyle loved me, and that's why he wanted me by his side. In reality, Kyle was just afraid I'd take his power, and he wanted me to work for him willingly. Heh. I let out a cold laugh. Let's see how he becomes the youngest and most outstanding CEO in this life. Watching the progress bar on the computer show that the illegal materials had been uploaded successfully, I knew Kyle would soon get a big surprise. I turned off the computer and went back to school, keeping my achievements and actions hidden. 7. Back at school. Internships were available in the second semester of my junior year. I focused my energy on finding a job and chose Enchi Company. Zoe held my internship report, confused. "Your GPA is first in the major. And you've won countless gold medals in design competitions. Why would you go to a small company that's about to go crazy?" Zoe exclaimed, even more confused. "I'd never go there. That's for sure. My goal is the Kyle Group, it's so famous." I looked at Zoe calmly. "You do know that's the Kyle family's company, right?" "What?" 2 exclamations rang out. Zoe and Lily spoke at the same time. "That scumbag is that powerful?" Lily asked in disbelief. Don't worry. It'll go bankrupt soon, I said. Then I added. I found evidence of their illegal activities and submitted it. I think we'll get results soon. Both of them gave me a thumbs up. Zoe chose another company. I started sending my resume to Anshi and scheduled an interview for the next day. I sent my design sketches and dress designs to the HR manager. Seeing their words of praise boosted my confidence even more. The next day, having fulfilled my ansai, I went to Anshi full of confidence. Looking at the building in front of me, I went up to the second floor. As expected, the HR manager was very impressed with me. They even offered me a monthly salary of 20,000 yuan. For an intern. That was a huge amount. I was very satisfied. Thinking back to my past life, when I'd given everything to the Kyle family, Kyle had only paid me 5,000 yuan a month. Heh. Kyle. You really had a cold heart. 8. A year passed in the blink of an eye. And I'd become Anshi's top designer and administrative director. Ding. A message from Zoe popped up on my phone. Stella. The class monitor is holding a class reunion tomorrow night. Let's go together. I pressed the voice button. Sure. I'll go. The next night, moonlight lit up the road ahead, wrapping it in a mysterious glow. I pushed open the door of the private room, and a burst of exclamations rang out. I can't believe Stella is still so beautiful after all these years. Yeah. But I heard Stella broke up with Kyle. Speaking of Kyle, is he coming today? The voices of the crowd filled the room, and I sat down calmly. Zoe, sitting next to me, winked and teased. Even a business suit looks good on you. So do you too, I said, looking at Zoe and Lily on my left and praising them. A year could really change a lot. Zoe had grown out of her childishness. She was no longer the little girl who used to cling to me and act coquettously. Now she worked as an HR at the Ethan family's company. Looking at Zoe's face, she seemed so easygoing. Yet she'd become an HR. I couldn't help but laugh. Stella. What are you laughing at? Zoe hurriedly pulled out a mirror. Only after confirming everything looked normal did she let out a deep breath. I scared myself half to death. I thought I'd put on the wrong shade of lipstick, she said. Lily burst into laughter and teased. A year has passed, and someone still hasn't made any progress at all. Come on. Everyone raise your glasses. Let's celebrate our wonderful college days. I clinked glasses with the others, ready to down the drink in one go. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. We turned to look and gasped. Kyle? Kyle's face was deathly pale. He was sitting in a wheelchair, pushed by a woman, and that woman was clearly Chloe. 9. At the sight, Zoe stood up, pointed at Kyle's nose, and snapped angrily. You scumbag. How dare you show up here? And with your mistress too. What? Mistress? Did Kyle cheat? The crowd was stunned, but their eyes were filled with curiosity to hear the gossip. Chloe panicked. She coughed twice, then put on a helpless, pitiful expression. Kyle and I have been engaged since we were kids. If anyone's the mistress, it should be Stella, she said. What? Everyone exclaimed, their eyes turning to me with accusing looks, as if I really were the other woman. Of course, I wouldn't let that false label stick. I spoke coldly. When he pursued me, he never mentioned having a fiancé. Besides, he was flirting with other women while we were dating. I broke up with him a long time ago. Kyle slowly parted his lips. His voice was horribly hoarse, like that of an 80-year-old man. Do you have proof? I let out a cold laugh. I have both witnesses and evidence. A year earlier, Lily had already sent me photos of him kissing other girls. Hearing how certain I was, Kyle grew guilty and fell silent. The crowd looked at him with disdain. Theft. Serves you right. No wonder you're in a wheelchair. The class monitor said bluntly, staring straight at Kyle. Chloe felt awkward. She couldn't understand why Kyle had insisted on coming to the class reunion. He was in a wheelchair, bedridden most of the time, and his voice was ruined too. Thinking about this, utter disgust flashed in Chloe's eyes. Kyle was no longer worthy of her. Looking at his repulsive state made her skin crawl. The crowd's stares of contempt bore into them. Chloe couldn't take it anymore. She pushed Kyle out of the room. After they left, the atmosphere livened up again. Everyone. Eat up. Stella. Don't let that guy ruin your mood, the monitor said, his voice full of righteousness. I couldn't help but smile and replied, okay. In the end, we raised our glasses together once more, cheering for our gone but not forgotten youth. I hailed a taxi, first sending the tipsy Zoe and Lily home. When I finally got back to my place, I washed up. Thinking of how Kyle had looked, I couldn't help but find it amusing. How could I have ever had feelings for a man like him? Now, my annual salary was 1.5 million yuan. I was no longer that little girl who only knew how to follow Kyle around. I was no longer love-obsessed now. I was more determined to chase my own dreams. 10. I returned to my hometown and pushed open the door. My mother's gentle voice called out, Stella's back. Come eat, dinner's ready. I hurried to respond. Because of work, I hadn't been back home for months. Looking at the table full of dishes, a twinge of bitterness welled up in my heart. What are you staring at? Hurry up and eat. My father, Solomon, said as he brought out the last dish and took a seat. I thought, happiness comes in many forms. Some people believe a quiet, ordinary life is happiness. Others think a passionate, dramatic life is more fulfilling. I picked up a piece of chicken from the plate. It was spicy and numbing, a classic flavor in Sichuan style cooking. I gave a thumbs up. Delicious. Stella, your dad cooked this. He knew you were coming back, my mother said with a smile. I looked at my father. His face was beaming with pride, as if asking for praise. I didn't hold back. This fried chicken is out of this world. You can barely find anything this good anywhere else. My father roared with laughter. I handed my mother a bank card, but she refused to take it no matter what. After insisting several times, I took the card back. I'll come back more often from now on, I said. Hearing this, my parents grew even happier, but they told me not to let it interfere with my work. I readily agreed. Time flew by, and 3 years passed in the blink of an eye. I rarely thought about the things from my past life anymore. That is, until Zoe introduced me to a boyfriend. He was the current CEO of the Ethan family, young and accomplished. After getting to know each other better, we officially confirmed our relationship. Looking at Ethan's handsome face, I couldn't help but ask myself, how had I ever liked a scumbag like Kyle? I shook my head, quickly pushing Kyle's face out of my mind. 11. I thought I would never see Kyle again. But that day came quietly, without warning. It was the company's annual leave. Ethan and I were walking in the neighborhood. It was hard to believe for a CEO. He was surprisingly innocent. The only date idea he could come up with was a walk, which felt so old-fashioned. I quietly took Ethan's hand, only to feel it was damp. Seeing how nervous he was, I couldn't help but smile. Aren't we already in a relationship? I teased. Can't we hold hands? Ethan's ears turned bright red instantly, like a shy little rabbit. It's not that. I'll be the one to hold your hand from now on, he said, looking a little frustrated, annoyed that he hadn't made the first move. I smiled softly. Okay. Suddenly, having posted me, I heard a sound. Up ahead, a person was sitting in the flower bed. He was wearing a tattered green coat. His hair was a messy bird's nest. His clothes were ragged, barely covering his body, and his face was covered in dirt, making it unrecognizable. He must be a beggar. Stella, do you want to give him something to eat? Ethan asked gently. I took a loaf of bread out of my bag and held it out to him. But all he did was open his mouth wide and make hoo-hoo sounds, as if desperate to say something. A shocking thought crossed my mind. Could this be Kyle? I squatted down. The more I looked, the more his facial outline and features resembled Kyle's, though it was hard to believe. I took back the bread and put it back in my bag. Serves you right, I snapped. At this, leave that out a low sigh. Kyle let out more hoo-hoo noises. I ignored him. Ethan looked curious but didn't ask any questions. He watched me walk upstairs, then quietly left. I called Zoe. I actually saw Kyle. Why is he rummaging through garbage for food in our neighborhood? I asked, confused. It's said that after the Kyle family went bankrupt, Kyle's mental state got worse and worse. His father, King, Presumably Kyle's father was sent to prison. Kyle couldn't afford the medical costs to keep his body going. So he dumped him on Chloe. Chloe was never favored in her own family. She'd only ever wanted to marry into the Kyle family. But she never expected the Kyle family to go bankrupt. She had to take care of Kyle, who was in a terrible mood all day. In the end, she grew more and more disgusted with him, dumped him, and was married off by her family's elder to an old man from the Zoe family. Note, likely a typo, may refer to another family. For example, Joan's family by her family's elder. I was shocked after hearing this. An old man from the Zoe family? You mean that cruel old man who tortured several new wives to death? Yeah. I guess you could say she's deserving of hatred, but also pitiful. Zoe said over the phone. She then had to hang up because something came up. I was shocked. But a man like Kyle didn't deserve my sympathy. Later, Afan and I officially decided to get married. On our wedding day, both our parents gathered happily, and our college classmates came to congratulate us. I married someone I loved, and we were happy. We drank the nuptial cup and entered the bridal chamber. Looking back, the grudges and grievances of my past life were all over. In the days that followed, my career flourished, and my family life was happy and fulfilling. Until one day, Zoe called me again. Stella, have you heard the news? What news? I asked, confused. Kyle is dead. It's even on the news. Zoe said urgently. I turned on the TV. There. The news was clearly broadcasting, after the collapse of the former Kyle family. Kyle, the heir to the Kyle family, had frozen to death. I said nothing and hung up the phone. After that, I never thought about the things from my past life again.